Luke, thanks for joining us here today.
Appreciate you having me.
Obviously, you're a busy guy. I mean, how much has your life changed since you became a Super Bowl champion?
A lot more media stuff and that kind of thing, but it's fun and it's a cool experience for me personally, and to have that attached to my name, a Super Bowl champion, is a pretty cool. It still hasn't really sunk in yet, so I can't complain about it at all.
There's so many people that have the athletic ability to make it in the NFL. Who instilled the work ethic in you to maintain it and stay in the NFL and get through Division I college?
I attribute a lot of that stuff to my dad, and actually now I say it, both my parents really. Just the kind of the way I was raised and the upbringing I had. My dad was a pretty good athlete growing up here in Windsor, and just some chats he gave me when we were younger. I mean, even times when I was at Rice in college, I remember one camp I was really struggling, kind of going through some adjustments, and he actually flew down there and kind of spent a couple of days, and just little things like that really kind of pushed me through to keep working and keep grinding through all the tough times.
You mentioned Rice. How much of a culture shock was it moving from LaSalle, Ontario to Texas, to Houston, to play football, where football is king?
And that was something that people always ask me, what's the toughest part, and going down to college. Don't get me wrong, there was a lot of things that were challenging with the football, but like you said, it's really just a completely different culture. And you go from LaSalle to, we were smack dab in Houston, Texas, 5 minutes from downtown, right in the medical center. And I really enjoyed my time there, but it's just things are different, and it kind of gives you a different perspective on the world. Even though, again, it's not like you move to a different continent or anything, but just going that far, I really had a hard time kind of adjusting to just even cultural and social norms. But like I said, I'm really glad I did it, and I've had that experience, and it's at the end, I made some of my best friends down there, and it's been kind of cool for me.
The assessment of talent always blows my mind. Like Jerry Rice, I think, is the perfect example. He came from Mississippi Valley State, and he becomes the greatest wide receiver possibly ever to play the game. How is the recruitment process for Rice for you? How did they find out about you? How did you get in? How did you get down to Texas to play football?
So one of their coaches was a former CFL player, and he came up here to a camp, and he had spotted me and said, we were interested, and I've always been a pretty tall kid, and I moved pretty well for my size, I feel like. So he said, send some film down, we'll kind of go from there. And they called me back. I sent a lot of Coach Glenn Mills with the Essex Ravens really helped me out, put together some high school, but also a lot of OVFL film from the Ravens. And they called me back right away, and they were shocked. And he said, I've been scouting Canadians for a little bit now, and I haven't ever seen this caliber of football out of a Canadian team, because our high schools is not really comparable, especially those high schools down in Texas. But they were really impressed with the OVFL film, and that really kind of propelled things into next thing I had a visit down there, and then a few other offers, and I decided Rice was the place I wanted to go to.
I asked Glenn Mills the same question about an hour ago. How difficult is it as a Canadian athlete to prove to American schools that you can play the American game when you grew up, in organized football anyways, playing the Canadian game?
That was a big adjustment for me, because I played slot receiver in high school. In fact, I was more of a defensive end. I went both ways, and going over there, all of a sudden, I'm hand-down tight end, which, not many offenses in the Canadian game utilize a tight end like the American game does. So it was a huge adjustment in that sense, and that was something that I always had a chip on my shoulder for, was, to kind of prove that, hey, I'm just as athletic as these, kids born and raised in Texas, and I can play at this level with them and succeed and excel. So that was kind of a big motivation for me, especially my younger years there at Rice, to kind of keep working and outwork other guys, so, to kind of prove. I know it sounds a little bit awkward and odd, but I always felt like I had a representation of Canadians, and I knew that if I didn't have a good showing, Rice probably wouldn't go back there and look for other players. So
Rice not being in a BCS conference, do you feel that guys coming in, you're a rookie this year, coming into the NFL from Division I schools, do you feel they have any advantage maybe with the speed of the game?
Definitely. I think that especially some of, maybe not all the BCS conference, but some of the big name schools like Alabama and Florida, or guys like that. And I think that, it's definitely a faster game, so maybe the adjustment isn't as big. But at the same point, I felt like there was a lot of pros that you could kind of draw from Rice. We weren't really given much. We didn't have the state-of-the-art facilities, so we kind of knew how to work and knew how to grind on a different level in some of these schools that, have the multi-million-dollar facilities and all the state-of-the-art stuff. When we were over here, like I said, kind of, it was a struggle at times. Let's put it that way.
Well,
so
just like Jerry Rice said, he purposely went to Mississippi Valley because they washed their own jerseys. He wanted that work ethic instilled in him. When did you first start to realize you were going to be drafted? And how does a scout from an NFL team, how do they talk? How do they deal with student athletes?
It's so for me, I had felt like I was going to be drafted going into my senior year. I had a lot of preseason stuff and accolades and that sort of thing. And then, my senior year statistically was not one of my stronger years. I ran into a couple injuries, and there was all sorts of question marks being thrown around. So I guess it wasn't until I had my pro day, and I put up some pretty good numbers there, that I felt pretty secure that I'd be selected. And it's interesting you ask, how scouts kind of go about talking to student athletes, because I really felt like no team really wants to tip their hand. So it's one of those things where, you would talk to some teams and you would kind of feel like maybe they were playing you to try and get somebody else to draft you, and then you talk to other teams that were showing no interest, but they're actually really interested in you. So it's really a big chess game. So I tended not to look into too many things with the scouts. I'd answer their questions honestly and then just kind of go from there.
You're drafted in the 5th round. Were you expected to be drafted in the 5th round?
I had heard a bunch of things, and online it had me going later. My agent thought I'd go sooner. So I kind of thought, right in between the two of them, which would have put me around 4th or 5th round, was kind of my expectations.
Were you in New York for it?
I was not. I was actually here in LaSalle, yeah.
What's it like to be, were you sitting around at home watching it?
I was.
Obviously, right?
Yeah.
Sitting around at home watching it, your phone rings, you get the call, and then you hear Roger Goodell say your name. Like, what's...
You know what? It was, believe it or not, it was more of a relief at first, just in the sense that, you're sitting there and you think you should be drafted earlier, and you see guys in your position that you feel like you're better than, and then all of a sudden it seems like every pick takes forever, and you're holding on to your phone just waiting for it to ring. And there were some faces at home that were like a little nervous, and it started to get a little awkward, I'll be honest. And I remember my dad went upstairs, and I said it's just a long process, and you're just kind of wondering, a lot of uncertainty. And all of a sudden, I get this phone call, and everyone in the room turns and looks at me. And I remember seeing it, and I said, "Hey, it's a Washington area code." And I answer it, and it was the GM, John Snyder, and he said, "We're going to select you here," and I think it was 2 or 3 picks away. I gave everyone the thumbs up, and my whole basement erupted.
That's awesome.
So it was a pretty cool. Then at that moment, it was like you went from the most tense, stressful situation to, an unbelievable atmosphere. Yeah, exactly. And I didn't actually hear Roger Goodell or call it out because we were all still celebrating and yelling, and I was on the phone with Coach Carroll and our tight ends coach. So, but it was definitely a pretty fond memory for me.
What was it like being drafted by a team like Seattle, who was in a win right now situation? Obviously, you'd rather that, but what would it have been like if, say, you would have got drafted by a Cleveland or a Jacksonville?
It's a blessing, just because, I've heard a lot of stories from former players that there's nothing worse than a losing atmosphere in the NFL. In college, it's one thing. I know people's jobs are in line, but the NFL, things are so magnified, especially coming out of Rice. So they were saying, when teams win, there's less player movement, there's less, the job security is a lot higher, and it's just a better atmosphere between coaches, between, personnel. And that was kind of outside of obviously winning the Super Bowl. That's always a great thing, when you come in and you're in a winning environment like that. Because I've been in college in teams that, getting a couple wins was a struggle, and we were able to kind of turn around my later years there. But it's tough, and it's tough to kind of shake that losing atmosphere. So to be at a team, like you said, that was this ready to win games was just a blessing.
Take us back to the first time you stepped onto an NFL field.
Yeah, it was a pretty surreal experience. The first time I was on an NFL field was a preseason down in, we went to San Diego, and at the time, Zach Miller, our starting tight end, was injured in camp. So I was out there for the first drive of the game, and, it's one of those things where you don't really have time to sit back and be in awe. But, now that I've done some reflecting, I was sitting there, I'm a 23-year-old just coming out of Rice, like you said, kid from LaSalle, Ontario. And, you sit out there in the huddle, and you got Russell Willson across from you. And I don't think Marshawn was playing that game, but, numerous times.
Surrounded by superstars, right?
Golden Tate, Doug Baldwin, Sidney Rice. And I'm just like, wow. But at the same token, though, when you get around those great players, it really propels your game as an athlete, to try and match their level. So I think it was really a big help for me.
It took 14 weeks, but you got your first NFL touchdown. Take us back to that.
It's a funny story, actually, because it's a play-action route, and I actually have an option to kind of keep it on the over or go straight up the near hash. I know that's a little football terms for the fans that don't know football, but it's based on it's a coverage read. And I was looking at the far safety, and he bit so hard on the play-action run that I thought it was a cover 3, which means the middle of the field is closed, and I kept it on the over. And watching it again on film, the safety just kind of was out of position, and it was a blatant misread by me. But Russ adjusted, and thankfully, with the huge play action and the bite by the safety there, I was able to catch that ball and kind of made things a little more difficult on myself. But it was pretty cool. As I was crossing the goal line, it was a pretty euphoric moment.
Not to mention you burned Patrick Willis on the play, which was pretty sweet. Your celebration was inspired by a different kind of footballer. Tell us about that.
So in college, we were sitting around, me and a couple of my close buddies, and we were watching. We're big FIFA video game soccer players. I don't play a ton of video games. If I do, it's always that one. And we were watching highlights of when Wayne Rooney scored this bicycle kick against Manchester City. And he went over and ran to the corner, and a lot more elegantly than I did.
Yours was terrifying.
Yeah, so it really looks nothing like it if you watch the two of them. But that was kind of the joke. Was in college, that's what we would do. And when me and one of my roommates played for the 49ers, we always kind of shot texts back and forth with a few other guys and said, hey, whoever scores his first touchdown, we gotta do we called it the Rooney celebration, which is what we did in college. So that was kind of a cool experience, and ended up kind of ironically I scored against them, so he was there to see it, and it was, like I said, it was kind of more of a throwback and a tribute to my college buddies.
Talking about playing against the 49ers in the NFC Championship game, the Dante Whitner hit on you.
Yeah.
I mean, I showed it to everyone here when we were talking about getting you here, and they're like in full speed. It's like, oh my God,
Yeah.
but he hit you shoulder to shoulder, in full speed. It looked insane. Yeah. How did that, this might sound like a stupid question, but how did something like that feel?
Believe it or not, especially that game, for me, was really the Super Bowl. I think everyone would agree with that. And there's such a rivalry there, especially out in Seattle. The 49ers are despised. So, all week it was, pretty built up and, rivalries across the board. And it was one of those things where there was so much adrenaline going, and the atmosphere is so electric that you don't really feel the effect of it until, maybe the next day. So for me, honestly, I was thrilled that they got the 15-yard penalty, and that's kind of a consolation prize. Would have wished I would have held on to it, but, 15 yards.
Dude, you were upside down at one point.
Yeah. So it was one of those things where, I actually jogged off the field, and at the time, the worst thing that happened was I bit my tongue. And I had bit it through my mouth guard, and I was actually bleeding for pretty profusely for biting a tongue. And it took probably a solid 30 minutes to go away. But other than that, I finished the rest of the game. I felt pretty good. So,
what was more of a overwhelming feeling, knowing you're going to the Super Bowl, or when you won the Super? Because the NFC Championship game, was a lot closer of a game than the Super Bowl was, and you're beating your rival.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you're supposed to be playing you were playing the highest scoring offense in NFL history in the Super Bowl. What was more gratifying? Which game?
I think after watching, it was kind of, having the Super Bowl championship was pretty gratifying, but the 49ers game was gratifying. One, because the game was much closer, but two, watching Denver on film beforehand, we felt like, maybe not that bad, but we felt like we were just going to come in and physically be able to handle these guys. We didn't think they were a very physical team. So in that sense, we knew that we were getting into a bar fight with the 49ers, which it usually is between us. And to come out of that one was a pretty gratifying experience.
At what point on the sidelines during the Super Bowl did you and your teammates like, oh my God, we're going to win this game?
For me, I think it was when Percy Harvin returned the kick in the third quarter. Because, you never know with Peyton Manning. And we were up, I believe, 22-0 going into the second half. And I was like, we need to make sure we get through this third quarter and keep rolling and keep our foot on the gas. And you could tell when they kicked that ball off and we scored, it just took the wind. Anything left that they had, it was pretty much gone, and it was pretty much smooth sailing from there.
So you win the Super Bowl. It's like, oh, my God. At any point, does the surreal moment stop? I mean, I saw you on TV. Marcus Allen is walking by you with the Vince Lombardi trophy. Like, what goes through your head? What are you thinking about at that point?
You know what?
Like one of the greatest in the game, right?
Yeah,
there.
it's pretty much a blur, and you're sitting there, and you hear all these great names that have never won a Super Bowl, and for me, my first year to be able to be on the run we had the whole season was, it was awesome, and it was a lot of fun to be a part of. So, like you said, it was words. I can't really even describe it today. Again, it just seems like it still quite hasn't hit me. I think it's starting to, but just one of those things where it was unbelievable. Again, I have a hard time putting that whole night into words.
When do you get the ring?
We were told June, but again, I'm not 100% sure on that.
What are you going to do with it? You going to wear it around everywhere?
You know what? I don't think I'll wear it. Maybe the odd football banquet, or if there's kind of like a public showing, people want to see it. But other than that, I'll probably keep it locked up and safe.
Who's a better baseball player, you or Russell Wilson?
Oh, I think Russell. I saw Russell, and I was never really a great defensive player, and I think Russell was a pretty much complete baseball guy. I was more, left-handed hitting power guy. So
one more thing real quick. What's next for Luke Willson?
Hopefully we can put together a dynasty at Seattle and keep winning and stacking up these championships.
All right, man. Thanks for joining us here. Congratulations on the big win, and I hope things just keep rolling for you guys.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Cheers. Awesome. Thanks a lot, man.
All right. No problem.
Awesome.
Yeah.